Hi, I'm doing a video for you all. This is one of my first kind of in front of cameras. It's certainly my first Christian video, so apologies if it's a bit awkward. But I just want to talk about rational Christianity, what I'm going to call rational Christianity. What I mean by that is there's a growing belief in and around society, Western society, among atheists in particular, but not all atheists, it includes a lot of Christians, unfortunately, which has a fundamental belief that Christianity is in some ways an irrational state of affairs, that if you're a Christian you are somehow fundamentally irrational, you're not capable of rational thought, and I wanted to discuss this at length because nothing is further from the truth in my experience, and I want to demonstrate why Christianity is a rational thought. I'm not saying that Christianity you can prove to be true with rational thought. I don't think you can rationalise Christianity to be true to a hundredth of a degree, but you can certainly have a lot more respect for people who are Christians as rational people, and this is really important to me because there seems to be a hijacking of science, especially around evolution. I mean, I have a genetics degree, and I'm very familiar with the kind of ping-pong to and fro on the internet when it comes to Darwin, neo-Darwinist thought versus creationism. And there's so much misinformation you don't get a chance to really explain with any quality. But one of the things that comes back time and time again, and it's constantly thrown in my face, is this belief. Whenever I talk to somebody who's not Christian, who believes in evolution, which is a thing I will talk about, they don't respect, or they believe it's some sort of just very, very highbrow version of superstition that Christians have, and that it can't be justified or rationalised, and it's kind of like contemptuous. So that if you're a Christian trying to talk about it, you're already starting from a position of contempt. And this is based on that the person must not be rational because they don't believe as I do. And they don't look at evidence the way that I look at evidence if you're not a Christian. And I can tell you absolutely that is not the case. Christianity is rational from a perspective that is fundamentally appeals to logic. But Christianity has a lot of things going for it as a belief system, but as an entirety it holds water extremely well. There are an awful lots of people who will tell you that the Bible contradicts itself. It just does not. They'll talk about how the Bible is massively degenerated from an original form, and it's a Chinese whispers document, and it can't be trusted. That is absolutely not true. There are fragments of what could well be the original John sitting at Manchester University, and they were found in about 1900, and they match pretty much exactly what was written it's matched exactly what's currently circulating. So you can easily go for yourself onto the internet, pick up a King James Bible, which is Old English, kind of ye olde English kind of Bible, and that was printed years before they ever found this fragment, and they reckon that the fragment is maybe 20-30 years after Jesus. And could well be the original, certainly a one-off copy. In terms of historical indexing, the Bible is absolutely peerless, and you must look this up at your own leisure on the internet, but the Bible as a document is 100% what was originally placed in front of people at the time it was written. It may be delusionary, but the Bible has an unbelievable authentication. You can show that it's been found in multiple places in the Middle East. I think there's 4,000 document fragments found, and they can be found widely apart, spaced a very short distance in time, and it's many magnitudes higher than the next best, which I think is Homer's Iliad, which measures in the dozens or maybe high dozens. The Bible is in the thousands, the 4,000 mark, in terms of document fragments that pair up together, that are scattered widely around the Middle East and the Mediterranean. So why does that matter? In and of itself, it doesn't. But it certainly isn't a bad symbol, a bad road sign. So first of all, there's a lot of lying about this subject, and I think you should not take my word for it. I think you should take some time and research what I've said. So the Bible is historically very accurate, and is without peer as a historically accurate document. It may be that it's rubbish, but it's the exact same rubbish that was written down at the time it was said it was written down. And there is almost no error. I mean, there are some very minor discrepancies that are found, and where they are found, you'll find all Bibles, at least the ones that I've bought, will actually mark. And in the margin, this is maybe not most commonly found in all manuscripts, for example. So that's really important to bear in mind, that from a rational perspective, the document, the Bible, is bizarrely, conspicuously consistent. So that's the first thing about the rational thought. The second thing I want to talk about the rational thought is that it's not that were you to say that the Christianity was true, and were you to say that the Bible is of it, you would have to see as a big green tick that it hasn't changed. Because you'd have to say the author is not just man, it's God, therefore it is somehow sort of supernaturally put in a bubble. The second, because it's his instruction book, or if it isn't, it isn't, but the Christians would say it is. The second thing that I want to talk about as a rational Christian is this this idea that people who believe in the Big Bang theory are almost without having to need to justify it as a belief. That is absolute nonsense. All the time from atheists I hear this comment that, oh, it's not a belief, it's just we don't believe in what you're saying. That is a statement of belief, that is a worldview, and it is a belief system that you're betting your life on. And what annoys me is that it comes from a fundamental assumption that from something the universe was created. So there's an eternal something in the Big Bang theory. And I'm assuming that you know what I'm talking about. So from nothing there was something. So from something there was a Big Bang. Okay. So you have the what I would call sort of humanist, secular philosophy, atheist philosophy, which says Big Bang evolution. Thank you very much. And you sit there and say, okay, but you still have to believe in an eternal something. Okay, because we're here. And where did we start? Where did it come from? Christians believe, among other religions I'm sure, that it comes from an eternal someone. And one of the things that annoys me about this kind of belief system that atheists often come up with is, who made God? As if that's a kind of sensible question. It isn't. The sensible question is, no one. The sensible answer is no one. And of course it has to be no one. Because God is God, and God is timeless, God is eternal, and God is before and during and after, and everything will continue after. So why is that important? If I believe that, I'm not irrational. I might be wrong, but I'm not irrational. Because it is equally irrational to sit there and say that from an eternal something everything exploded. And there are attempts to break down how the Big Bang happened, and the order of events. I'm not too familiar with that, I'm not a physicist, but I am an evolutionary. There are three sort of strings to the atheist bow. One is the Big Bang, the other one is paleobotany and paleontology, and then there's the evolutionary kind of record and DNA. And it's the third one that I would say that I am fully equipped to debate. The first two that I just have a cursory knowledge, but probably a working knowledge, but no greater than that. So not really fit to really debate in any detail, but certainly enough to have a conversation about. So, first of all, Christianity does not lose marks for having the guts to believe in an eternal someone, because it is exactly equivalent to an eternal something. You may not agree with that statement, but it's certainly not an irrational or rational debate, because they have their degree of an equivalency, and I would argue they are very equivalent, although an atheist would probably seek to say they are not at all equivalent. That is not a rational thing to do. You have to look at it from a completely independent thought point of view and say, if you believe in an eternal something or an eternal someone, they are both conundrums, and they both have pluses and minuses to them, and they both have unexplained elements. So Christians are not irrational in this. This is one of the things I want to tell you. And the second thing is, why Christianity? The next great big wall of kind of debate is, are Christians any more valid than Hindu or somebody who worships Aboriginal gods, or the Fijian deities, maybe who've gone out of date now because Christianity came? And the truth is that you can say with an argument and a degree of certainty, I believe, that yes, it is unique. And Christianity is unique in two fundamental ways. One, Jesus is recorded as saying that his kingdom will have no end. Now I want you to sort of think about that. If the Bible isn't altered, and I think you should go and check that, but it isn't, it means that around the time Jesus died, within a few years of that happening, someone had already written an account that was circulating around people who may well have heard it and was relying on them to carry the letters. This is before email. So you write something, it's very likely to end up in the dirt. Unless the people that you're writing it with are nodding in agreement. This is what happened. That's important, but I won't dwell on that, but that's important, okay? In a media-restricted environment, that you're relying on a goodwill enter kind of wave to propagate this, and it got heavily propagated quickly, okay? So you would have to assume that when it was written, it was presented to people, some of whom will have not been party to the events, but some of them who may have had first or second-hand knowledge of the events in and around the Middle East. And in that document, it says 4 times in all the Gospels that Jesus says that he will have a kingdom that has no end. Now, Hitler said that. He said that the Third Reich will last 1,000 years, and he was an idiot. And if you look, and I haven't said it, Conrad Bate has not said that I will have a kingdom that has no end, and you've never said it, and you probably never met anybody who would ever say it. Winston Churchill, a great man, I believe, never said it. There are so many people who've never said that kind of thing. I'm not saying that saying it in and of itself means that you're not crazy. You could say it and be completely convinced and be crazy, but as a rule, it does not tend to come out of people's mouths, and you struggle to find. Now, that's not completely true of religions, and there are, I think, the Baha'i religion has a guy saying similar things. But what I'm trying to tell you is that you have a testable piece of rational drop of thought here, which is, for it to be true, person A who demonstrates the desire to achieve B, has achieved it. That's a form of evidence. And it's rational evidence, because if Jesus hadn't said it and he'd said, oh, well, Christianity might be something one day, but it's up to you guys, which he could have done. But he didn't. He made really clear statements, and he was a very poor man, and he lived in a very difficult times, and he was killed quite young, and he worked for 3 years only, 3 years in his ministry. And he was killed, crucified. That's the other thing. He was definitely crucified, and he definitely existed. Those two things are historically watertight. And I promise you need to look into it if you don't agree. And I know that Muslims are taught that Jesus didn't die on the cross, for example. But it's not true. He did. It's mentioned in Josephus and an awful lot of Roman and Jewish historians talk about it. So he may have been many things, but he was killed on the cross. So you have this kind of weird kind of scenario, which is Christianity is from a person called Jesus Christ, who then says, I will have a kingdom that has no end. And lo and behold, it's the biggest religion on earth. That's important. It's not in and of itself brutally important, but it is an interesting green tick. And it goes alongside with the green tick of the Bible. Now, this is to do with rational thought. I.e., if I were to posit that a God would exist, and I posit as well, and make an assumption that God that exists is interested in me to some degree, and those two are not assumptions that automatically follow one another. A lot of people in religion will tell you that Christianity, that God loves you, but that is not necessarily true. God might not like you. God might not be interested. God might be the other side of the galaxy doing something else. Or there might be many gods. And how can you get to the marrow of that issue? You can't. You can't in and of itself. And I think that's probably the biggest step of faith that I made as a Christian, which is that there is a God, and that he loves me and regards me highly. Because were those two things to be true, it would not be fair for this God, who has an interest in me, and is greater than I am, and I can't reach him, but he can see. So he can see me, but I can't see him, kind of thing. If he is interested in me, and he has interest and compassion in me, and wants to talk to me, and have a conversation with me, and have a relationship with me, he has to take the initiative. It cannot come from me. And this is a real big part of why I believe Christianity is likely to be true. In fact, I believe it, but I don't think it's rational. Because if you sit there and say that there is an eternal someone, and if you say that eternal someone loves you, and they're big ifs, if you're prepared to concede those 2 points, then you'd have to assume that he's a bit of a git if he ended up being the god of the rock god of the, middle of nowhere island. He would have to set up such a stall that the human race could not know who he was. Could not know who he was. Or he wouldn't be fair. That's another thing about God. I believe he is fair. He doesn't just love me, he loves everybody the same, and therefore he has to be fair to some degree with everybody. And so this is really important. So you have this kind of concept that God has done it for you before you met him. So before you were born, he already knew about you, kind of worldview. And that he's got up in the morning and made the effort before you even knew breakfast was on. Okay, that's really important as well. And so I would have to say, based on those assumptions, that I would expect to find that God was present on the earth in a religion, or in some manner present, visible, maybe not readily available, but at least you could tap into the message if he had one for you. Because you would say, well, the religion has to be pretty big, not because in and of itself, because it would have to hold weight over time. It would have to have a number of people who found merit in it because of its truth, because it is true. There are to believe in Christianity means you believe in a lot of religions are wrong. So a lot of things become untrue. So you have to say, well, I would say you may immediately down to a few religions: Hinduism, Islam, Christianity. In terms of visibility and access to the message, because God's not an idiot and he doesn't want to make everyone suffer. Now that still means that somebody born on an island, illiterate, never able to leave, and dying on the island might die and never get to hear about God. And there's a debate about that. But by and large, the human species, as big as it is, and over time as it has been, would have had enough chance to bite at the apple of information about this person. And the last thing I would say about Christianity as to why it's true, I believe, and rationally holds water, more importantly, is that the message must be subtle and yet big. It's a strange one, this, you see, because people aren't born out of the womb believing in a certain way. We're not born out of the womb knowing how to walk. We pick it up, we all work it out at some point. Almost everybody does. Works out how to walk. And same with talking and listening and all the things that the body can do, and the mind can do with it. You get up and you start to develop into them. But we don't all develop into a rational understanding of God. So it shouldn't be, to appeal to my rational thought, if God is kind and God is loving and interested in me, it shouldn't be up to my wit. And this is one of the reasons why I don't believe in Hinduism above many things, because there's a great intellectual strength in Hinduism, but there's this pursuit of knowledge to its own ends and a refinement. And this, to me, says that Christianity is effectively something that you have to encounter intellectually. But it's not an intellectual. It's not like the Greeks used to have these gods that you used to rationalise and kind of conjure up. Oh, well, if God's like this, he must be like that. Therefore, we have that. And you actually have polytheistic environments when you have that kind of thought, which is because straight away the thoughts are why do bad things happen, etc., etc., etc. Because that's the number one objection to God as well. But that's not rational. That's a debate for another time. But what I'm trying to say is that Christianity holds water because it is a idea seed that you don't have to be highly equipped to receive, but it is the message. But equally, you can have a very clever person who doesn't understand it. You can have a very simple-minded person who gets it straight away, and that is really, really important, because people are all made differently, and people have all got different levels of ability, and so it's really important that God wouldn't differentiate in an academic sense. This is really important, because Christianity definitely has that. It has a thought that would not occur to man. You wouldn't break up one day and suddenly conceptualise, oh, God loves me, he's offered a sacrifice already and I have to receive it. But straight away, that's something that confounds even the cleverest people, like Richard Dawkins sitting there scratching their head, this is nonsense to me. I think Christopher Hitchens as well, he understood Christianity intellectually, but he didn't understand it in the way that some simple farmer might. And it's quite bizarre watching people who don't believe in Christianity wrestle with the Christian issues as if they were understood it, because they really don't. And I don't say that to be mean, but they really don't. So it has to have a third element, like as in beyond the wit of the wise, but within the realms of the dumbest of people. I really, really think that's important, and Christianity definitely is that. It does not occur to you naturally. It's a very odd way of looking at things, and yet it's beautifully succinct. And when it clicks, it clicks. And that's for me the reasoning that I believe that Christianity is fundamentally rational, and that Christians who believe it deserve respect as people who can rationalise, because you're not surrendering and lobotomising your ability to reason. When you become a Christian, what you're doing is you're actually putting on a level playing field an awful lot of options, because you're saying, well, maybe it's an eternal something, but maybe it's an eternal someone. Maybe it's like this, but maybe it's like that. And the ability to not pick and choose, but the ability to look at everything equally is what Christians have when they're looking at evolution and paleontology and the Big Bang Theory, because they're genuinely looking at it from a point of view of, well, it could be true, because science is quite compelling, but equally science has got a lot of holes in it, and the atheist can't do that. He has to fundamentally... That's why I say that atheism is a form of belief. It is a form of belief, it's a worldview, and you have all sorts of ways of breaking that apart, but the thing I would go back to is, first of all, God would have to have written a book and not messed it around with it. It's not a scrapbook, it's obviously his book. If it exists, it's got to be out there somewhere. Get digging, because when you find it, you will know, because it's going to be unaltered. That's one of the things that I would say. Second of all, God found me before I found him. Third of all, it's out there somewhere to be found. It must be. Jesus is the most commonly known name, higher than the next number one, number two, which is Coca-Cola, I believe, in the world. Jesus has to have said things that became true. Now, he has made some prophecies about himself that were written at a time when the religion was tiny. It's become the biggest religion on earth. You also have a situation where Christianity is beyond the wit of the wise, but within the kind of understanding of the simple. And then, last but not least, you have the size of the religion. It's the biggest religion in the world, which means that it's been tried successfully by an awful lot of people, and even though they die, and this is the thing people forget, that even though they die, they are replaced. If you look at China, where Christianity has been suppressed, they now have 270, I think, no, sorry, not 270, I think it's somewhere between 80 and 90 million Christians, to America's 270, that's where the 270 comes from. You've got Africa, where when I was a child, 10 years old, a lot of Africa was 50-50 Christian Muslim. Now it's not. It's about 70-30 in many parts of Africa, and 6 million people in Africa become Christians. It goes up by 6 million every year at the moment. That's a large number. Korea, Christianity is already, I think, if you combine Protestantism and Catholicism, it's bigger now than Buddhism in Korea, South Korea. So you can say that people are trying it and finding something in it. That's rational. You'd expect to see that. If it was just a nonsense way of looking at things for comfort's sake, you wouldn't have that. Well, you might have it to some degree, but you in the West, you have this staid kind of grumpy view of Christianity, which is, of course, if you've got any sense, you don't believe in it. And I think the opposite is true. I think more than anything else, Christianity says if you've got any sense, you would consider it. You certainly wouldn't despise it as irrational, and you wouldn't believe that it lobotomised you of sense. because it does hold water. The whole thing, taken as a whole, as a worldview, holds very, very well to analysis. Very well. And it holds up very well to scrutiny. And you know that because very clever people become Christians. And some people have rationalised themselves into Christianity. C.S. Lewis was one, and he's not the only one. The guy who wrote Ben-Hur was somebody who tried to write a story about proving that the Bible was wrong, and he ended up becoming a Christian. And these are people who came to it late in life, fundamentally opposed to it, and dug deep to try and prove it from the Bible, and failed and capitulated. And that's another thing that I want to talk about. That very clever people with a lot of rational, you've got a lot of reason to admire their ability to be rational and to be logical. Those clever people who've gone on before us aren't to be maligned or ignored or just parcelled off as a feature of their society. There were people who came to terms with the belief system. And I do think that the West in Europe is in a weird position in that I think as well as we're losing our Christianity slightly, I don't think we're losing it as much as people think, but as we're losing our Christianity slightly, we're expecting it to be replaced by nothing, and that won't be the case. Christianity will be replaced by something of its own kind, and I think it's possible that it might be Islam. And so Christianity, which is, and I do believe it is a blessing to the countries that have it. I think that you can find examples where that isn't true, but by and large, that the Christian message does not produce oafish, slavish societies of ignorance. It doesn't. It typically goes out and does free education, hospitals, that kind of thing, as a society. And it's very much the belief in these kind of fundamentals that the atheists benefit from massively in their ability to do the learning that they do, because they go to free schools, etc., 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 often founded by people adhering to the principles of the Bible. Anyway, that's my rational kind of thing, and the main just thrust of it, my message through all of this is, don't hate or treat as irrational people who are Christians just because they're Christians. Okay, thanks very much.